Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Her Talk Show. We dive into inspiring thoughts, ideas, and stories on this podcast, all with one purpose: to empower and uplift women just like you. I am Sabrina Victoria, your host and guide on this journey of self-discovery and growth. I invite you to hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. Together, we are creating a vibrant community of empowered women. Get ready to unleash your brilliance. Her Talk Show starts now.
We come to you every day with the best speakers, relationship coaches, spiritual mentors, trailblazers, business owners, authors, young hustlers, podcasters, entrepreneurs, fitness trainers, therapists, financial advisors, and more. We ask our guests one question: what do you know that I don't know? Get ready, because today's guest is about to change the way you view your world. This is Her Talk Show, hosted by Sabrina Victoria.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of Her Talk Show. We have had over 500 women grace this stage, and we are adding another one to the list today. If you are listening live, welcome. And if you're listening on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay wherever you're at so we can send you some love in the comments. Either way, if you are watching us live, thank you so much for those of you already joining us. Please share this video so we can get more eyes and more ears on the awesome content that we are about to share today. Today's guest speaker, Kristin Quiroz Bayona, is a podcast coach and content strategist on a mission to help female entrepreneurs create, launch, and grow purposeful, sustainable, and profitable podcasts. I love that. She helps heart-centered entrepreneurs, creatives, and coaches from underrepresented communities go from overwhelmed to confident podcaster so they can take up more space online, yes, and treat and run their podcast like the valuable business asset it is. Welcome, Kristin. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for that lovely intro. Such
Yes.
great energy.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for being here. I'm totally in love with podcasting. So I am so excited to have you here and to hear all the stuff, to hear all the things. When did you get into podcasting?
So back in 2020, smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, I had been furloughed from my job, and I found myself, oh, okay, I technically have a job. I have money coming in. So what do I want to do? What should be my, how should I make the best of this time that I have? And I had a travel blog for about a year, but I had been thinking, I'm not really connecting with anyone, and connections are really important value of mine. And I was an avid podcast listener. I loved, and what I still love about podcasting is hearing someone's story, initially thinking like, I don't have anything in common with this person. And then something in their story, you're like, oh my gosh, like, taps into like your heart or your soul, or you just connect with it, or you feel seen. I think that's a really important value of mine as well, is help other people feel seen. And so I thought, okay, maybe I can do this podcasting thing. I have this content marketing background, and surely I can figure it out. So my first podcast was a travel podcast, and I had that for about a year, and I loved bringing on people from all over the world. It was important for me to share perspectives around travel that I wasn't necessarily seeing. And now I'm on my second podcast, which is more business and personal development focused.
That's awesome. With the travel podcast, was that you bringing on like travelers, like people who have gone places?
Yeah. So I had someone on who she was like a diver, and that's mainly what she did. And she dove with like certain organizations that would go visit shipwrecks that brought over slaves. She was African American, so she would share, and it was historical, like archaeological dives, so that was really fascinating. I had someone on who was a permanent house sitter who did not have a home at all, just went from house sitting job to house sitting job. And there's so many fascinating stories out there around travel. So that show's on pause, but I'm getting like this inkling to like bring it back again, because I just talked to the most interesting people about their travel and, you know, how they move through that space and through the world.
Yes. Wow, that is so exciting. Did you ever monetize that? Like affiliate links with vacation places?
That is so interesting you say that. So I initially thought that was what I was going to do,
Yeah.
but I didn't feel comfortable in the sort of travel influencer space.
Okay.
It didn't feel connected to me, like it wasn't genuine for me personally.
Yeah.
And then I really felt it was such a great experience, because I realized that there's something kind of sacred about travel to me and exploring different cultures. And I didn't want to mesh the two. You know, I didn't want to, there's something about monetizing it that just was like, no, I don't think this is the path. And I totally like get it, you know, like the draw to get paid to travel and be in that world. But it just didn't feel right for me. And I had someone on that would talked about eco travel, but I started to kind of see the travel industry, like a lot of every other industry, they can kind of commodify things that are meant to have good, you know, impacts in the world, but it can become more of a marketing scheme than an actual, like, is this really helping? So there's interesting things in travel, the travel space, that I discovered that I was just kind of like, this isn't really aligned with me and how I like to explore the world. So I changed paths to the podcasting world, because there are a lot of things in this space and amplifying different voices that really does resonate with me. And it's part of, I think, my purpose here is to help women amplify their voices.
Wow. Very cool. What an interesting way into that. That is awesome. I love podcasting. I started out, one podcast a week, and now I do a podcast every single day.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's just fun. I just love listening to what other people are doing and thinking and theories and ideas. I mean, we only know what we know.
Mm-hmm.
And there's sometimes I hear people's, I'm like, I've never even thought, I didn't even know that existed. I didn't know that was a thing, you know?
Yeah, I think if you're like a learner, you know, it sounds like you are. And I know that's really what drives me. I'm super curious and I have to constantly be learning and growing. I think podcasting is a really great way to satisfy that kind of itch, you know, because you're learning from others. Everyone's perspective is, you can find something in it, right? Some kind of connection. And then there's that connection piece with podcasting, and then it's through your voice. So it's really intimate connection. So I really love it.
Yeah. I know you speak a lot to individuals that maybe have thought about it, but maybe aren't, maybe a little on the shyer side, more of a wallflower. What's your message to them? What are your thoughts on getting those type of people who do have great stories, but maybe they're just not feeling it, and then eventually podcasting, and then eventually stages?
Yeah, that those people are near and dear to my heart, the more introverted, wallflower type people, because that's who I am. I struggled with public speaking for so long in my corporate career. I really tried to put myself in positions where I had to speak. I did Toastmasters, which was like really not the right fit for me. It was very structured. It felt very kind of outdated, but I know some people love it. But I tried all these different ways to help get myself comfortable speaking in front of people. And what I realized through my journey is that podcasting was a really great way for someone who is on the shyer side, who is on the more quiet side, to develop their voice and to practice sharing their message, delivering their message, figure out what their message even is that they want to say. And through this podcast, I've been able to practice that. I'm on, I have over 100 episodes. Most of those are interviews, but I do also do solo episodes. I probably have done around maybe 30 solo episodes, but through those episodes, I've been able to share, what it is that I'm passionate about, what I really believe in, and then being a guest on other podcasts. And you really get to do all those things. And granted, it's not in front of, a live audience, but you still know that like you're speaking to someone out there in the world or several someones. And, like this is live. I still am aware that people are tuning in, groups of people tuning in. But there's like this kind of safety net a little bit, right? Because I'm behind a screen, or if I'm on podcast, I don't even have to show my face. So it's just a really nice baby step to the stage, to these bigger opportunities. And so for me, I've used the podcast, I've used being on other people's shows, and then, started like, okay, I'm going to do a live webinar, or, oh, I'm going to do a smaller speaking engagement. And then eventually I spoke at a national conference. And I know I would not have gotten there if I didn't do it through podcasting, because podcasting just has so many things built into it that give me that, like this introverted person that I am, those breaks that I need as I'm pushing myself outside my comfort zone.
Can you give some examples for those listening?
Yeah. So, being on a podcast, you have to write, you have to be alone a lot, right? Because if you're editing your own show, if you're writing your show notes, the time that you're actually speaking is short, but it's really impactful. So you can like really deliver your message, but then you can also have that space to like reflect. A lot of us introverts can be we tend to be perfectionists. So knowing that we can edit ourselves, and it's not like, oh, you have to get it right this first time. That's very like calming to our nervous system, knowing we have a little bit of space to flub our words as we, are first starting out. Having that time, set space for ourselves in between, recording is important. And then what I've really figured out through podcasting is, when I was speaking in corporate, I never really felt connected to what I was talking about. And when I had my own platform, my own podcast, and I was able to talk about the things that I was really passionate about, I realized it was like this light bulb moment of like, oh, it's not just about being nervous in front of people, because when you're connected to your like heart-centered message, like I'm lit up, and all the worry about the other people, what will they think, the perfectionism, it melts away. And I think that's a big deal for a lot of introverted people. We tend to like the one-on-one, meaningful, deeper connections, richer conversations. And so I think that's where podcasting kind of comes in too, because you get to share your heart-centered message, right? You can really develop that in an intimate way. So those are the kind of the top things that I've discovered in my own journey of, podcasting to stage.
Yes. The, individuals who don't necessarily appreciate small talk.
Yes.
I think is, 100.
Yeah.
Because you get to go way deeper into a conversation. It's like worthy. It's a worthy conversation. I know I get like that sometimes. Like sometimes I'm hanging out and I'm just like, I don't even want to be doing this. Well, this whole like, how are you?
It's draining to us.
Yeah.
Like to the introverts, it's so draining. It's like, do I want to go to the dentist and get a filling, or do I want to have a surfacey conversation? I'll go to the dentist any day.
Oh, that's great. Impact. What's the impact that podcasting can have? I know you're saying stages. What can somebody expect? Obviously, stages is a great one, but I'm sure there's multiple things that people can do when it comes to impacting their world or their community.
Yeah. So, sharing your message. And I especially think, there's a lot of big podcasts, right, that get so much attention, but I think it's important to, talk about the niche podcasts, the smaller podcasts, because they are speaking to people typically who haven't heard their specific story or their specific point of view. No one's talking to them. And so when you do find someone who's like, oh, finally someone's speaking to me, like not just the masses, but they can connect with my experience. I think the impact of helping other people feel seen is so, so important. And I think it's something you can really accomplish through podcasting, especially if you're like, one of my clients, she was like, no one's talking to Latina moms. And she's like, and I want to be that voice. I'm like, yes, girl, let's do it. I will help you start your podcast. And so it's like that very like kind of specific person. And that's why I like to help people with underrepresented voices, because people are craving to hear someone speaking to them. And I think that's so, so powerful. And impact, I mean, especially in terms of like building your network. If you're a business owner, I'm a business owner. People who I have on my podcast, they stay in my community and we collaborate. We say, hey, I know you're a good fit for this other podcast, or come on my show, or, there's just so many ways to collaborate, which is really important when it comes to your business. And then building a community of really aligned people who can potentially turn into clients, who might want to work with you. But you're really building trust through using your voice. And then you can have the impact through your work, right?
Yeah, I agree. People listening now, we have a ton of people hanging on. They're listening, they're hanging out. And I'm just being pulled to ask, how difficult is it to start a podcast? Because, right, we're listening right now and we're like, Kristin, okay, this makes sense. I get this. Like, I could understand, right? We're sitting by ourselves. It's less intimidating. We're practicing our story. We're practicing speaking. But podcasting, that's like way out of my wheel well. Like, how difficult is this to even do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's like everything, there's different levels. So do you want to have like a live show like this? Or, do you want to publish episodes every week, every day, once a month? So those are kind of things to think about. And so if you're feeling intimidated about the process, I mean, it's like how I approach everything. You just start small, and maybe it's just hopping on Zoom, recording something, and maybe you don't really need to edit it too much, and getting a podcast host and throwing it up there and doing a simple Canva art. Like I don't think it's too difficult. I think there are a lot of resources out there. I have a course, that you could go through and helps you do it step by step. Or if you really want to expedite the process and maybe tech's not your thing, or you maybe are still feeling some like imposter syndrome or self-doubt around using your voice, I have like a coaching, one-on-one coaching session. So there's different levels of podcasting, and there's different levels of support to match that. So I guess that's what I would say. It depends on what your technical capabilities are and skills, but then you also have to bring in like, how comfortable am I with pushing myself outside of my comfort zone, which I 100% get that's a big part of podcasting, because that was a really big deal for me. No one likes their voice, the sound of their own voice. That's just a fact. will not initially, right? And then I think it took me a couple of episodes where I was like, I actually like the sound of my voice. There's some things that are going to be uncomfortable, but on the other side of it is your voice and all the people that you can impact by using it.
Yeah. How much, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but I know that you have a love for communities that are not represented.
Mhm.
What are your, I guess, views on that as far as getting those people heard?
Oh, I just think it's so, so important. And, I mean, I'm a Mexican American woman, so being a woman in and of itself, and this is, in our culture, it's like the patriarchy. There's systems in place, there's white supremacy, like there are systems. And so I think by using our voice, that's how we push back on those systems and say, hey, we're here and we have something to say and it's important. And I just think the more different voices you have out there, the less like barriers there are, right? Because like I said earlier at the top of the show, there have been so many people I've listened to, and I'm like, I have I have zero in common with this person, with this man, or with the, you know what I mean? Like this person, maybe it's a socioeconomic gap, right? Like, oh, this millionaire, I have nothing in common with them. But sure enough, there's something in their story where I'm like, oh, I totally understand that. And so I think that's the power of sharing as many perspectives as we can, and especially giving platforms to people who don't easily have access to that or haven't traditionally, historically had access to them, because it just kind of brings us all closer, right? It just helps us see each other's humanity. And for me, I'm like, well, what's more important than that? So this is just my avenue, right? Is the podcast. So.
That's great. As far as business goes, that's what we're talking about right now is impactful community, kind of focused. What about expanding businesses? What are your thoughts as far as how powerful podcasting is for small to medium-sized businesses?
Yeah, I had a PR expert on my podcast, and she was definitely speaking my language. She's very, very successful at what she does. And she was like, if you are a business owner and you're not getting on podcasts / don't have a podcast, but not everyone has to have a podcast, but if you're not at least guesting on podcasts, like you're missing out on a huge opportunity. And so I think it's really important to be putting ourselves out there. Getting in front of different audiences is so powerful for building your visibility, awareness. And then if you have your own, it just gives you these opportunities to get in front of your guest audiences, or to do swaps and collaboration. So it's just a really great tool. And then podcast content is one of the best things to be able to repurpose across all of your platforms. I mean, talk about like one and done.
Yeah.
You can repurpose it a million different ways. And as business owners, our time is so valuable. And for me, if I can start with a piece of content I created that I really believe in and I'm really behind, and then just create social media posts, put it in my email, put it, here and there, my YouTube channel, then I've saved myself so much time, and I know that I'm using something that really means I put a lot of thought in and really means a lot to me. And for me, like being, having my mission, being a mission-driven business owner, like that's so, so important.
Yeah, I agree with that. Ooh, as far as I believe that podcasting has definitely been the catalyst for a lot of the growth. I really like what you're saying as far as the swapping. I think that being able to use exactly that example has really catapulted my business, bringing them on my podcast. And then at the back end of the podcast, being able to do one or two swaps so that we're both stepping up in the podcast world has really broadened my resume. And having a podcast list is incredibly valuable because you're always having something to give. there's always a give.
Right.
Every single phone call.
Yeah. Yes. I feel the same way. It's like if you get on a call with someone, maybe it's a connection call or you're in a networking virtual group, and you just some people you just like, oh, this person's amazing. Like for me to have that in my back pocket of like, wow, I think you're great. I'd love to have you on my show. Like, I mean, that's huge, and so not only do I get to highlight this person, but then I get to continue that relationship with someone that just really sparked something in me. And I love having that as a resource.
Yeah. What are your thoughts as far as how often somebody should be podcasting? Because I've heard everything from like 2 a month to what I'm doing like every day. What's a good number, do you think, for business growth?
I would say once a week is probably a safe number. But I also like to tell people, and this is what I tell my clients, is to always honor your capacity. Because if one a week sounds too much to you, you're not going to stick with it. Yeah. So always keep in mind what's sustainable for you, because podcasting should be joyful, I think. And so you don't want to get yourself in a situation where you're overtaxed yourself and you've committed to something. The good news is you can try different things with podcasting, which is another reason why I love it. When I first started my podcast, I was doing solo episodes every week and then an interview episode every week. And then my second season, or maybe it was my second year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to cut back and do every other week a solo episode. And then this last season, I kind of did them like once a month, and I only did the solos, okay. But I had interview episodes every week. Got it. And I was like, I'm just going to do it when something sparks for me that I really want to talk about. And that actually really worked.
The really pressure.
Well. Yeah.
There's pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it worked it made it so much more fun. And I knew I had the interview episode every week. And then so it took pressure off of me. And then when I did get on the mic and record, it was fun. Yeah. And I'm like, this needs to be joyful because I love it. And I don't want to make it into a thing where it's not. Yeah. But I know like you have every day. And I think you probably love that, right? Being able to talk to someone every day.
For now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always change.
Everyone always is like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, yeah, because right now, like what you said, right now it works.
Yeah.
Like right now I enjoy it. There's a really nice flow to what I'm doing. I didn't start out every day though. I started out once a week. I started out solo. Then I went to once a week, then twice, then 3. And then I was on a podcast with somebody, and she said, how often do you podcast? I said 3 times a week. She's like, oh my gosh. She's like, do you like that? She's like, you must really like it. I'm like, I do. I'm like, if I could do it every day, I would. She's like, well, why don't you? And I was like, I will. And then literally that day, I opened up my calendar just to see, because the thing is, when you get into the world of podcasting and you're doing it, like when you actually commit to it, you get a calendar so people can book. And then you can change your days. You can go from 1 to 5, back to 2, back to, if you're only booked out, if you only allow your calendar to book out maybe 30 days or 60 days in advance, then you can flux and what that looks like for you.
Yeah. And that's why I love podcasting. I have seasons. And I think as long as you communicate to your audience, I'm always telling my audience, I love experimentation. I am going to continue to evolve this podcast. So they know, like when I change something up, they're like, oh, that's Kristin. She's trying something different. And I always give them like context, like, okay, this is why I'm doing this. Or I have a seasonal podcast because I have to take breaks to like refresh my creativity. But they all know that, everyone who listens knows. And then they kind of, I think, expect like, okay, what is she going to do this season? What is she going to have new questions? So I definitely build it into like the expectation of my podcast, because I don't like being boxed in. And so I like to continue to evolve and grow. And I want the audience to come along that with me. I don't want them to feel like, wait, what is she doing? She told me she was doing this and now she's not. I think for the algorithm standpoint, just as long as you're consistent, like whatever you decide, stick with that.
Yeah.
And then if you adjust it, stick with that. Like just be consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I did also to kind of add to this conversation with my YouTube. So when I first started, I actually started out as a YouTuber by myself, just telling my story on YouTube. And then I started inviting females on with me. Wasn't necessarily calling a podcast, just like an interview. And then the word podcast kind of dropped into my world. I had never really even thought of it before, but it was brought up at some point. I dove into that, figured out how to get the audio in. But I've been doing the YouTube, now for a while. And what I was doing in order to what you said, as far as keep the consistency, is when I was doing just 1 or 2 a week, like in the very beginning, I was either myself at first and then eventually having somebody else cutting up my podcast. This way I was able to get content dropped every single day, whether I was podcasting or not. So literally since the beginning not the beginning, but towards the beginning, until literally today, I have smaller pieces of my podcast being dropped every single day. So now that I'm live podcasting every day, I'm still having those drops. So now I'm literally dropping 2 videos every day. And that has really helped the organic growth. A lot of times people always feel like they have to put money into things.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing the consistency thing, like you said, the organic growth kind of comes naturally.
Yeah, it really does. And I am very much about organic growth. Like if you want like aggressive growth tactics, like I'm not your girl. There are plenty of other people who do that, but yeah, it's so important. And the consistency thing too, it's also just like showing up, not just for your audience, but like for yourself, right? Like I know I'm committed to this and I believe in it. It's kind of saying like, I believe in this podcast and where it can go. And I think there's an energy behind that, right? That then does result in other people coming along with you and being interested in what you're putting out.
Definitely. So your podcast is called Podcast and Amplify?
Yes.
Why did you decide to name it that?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not great at naming things. I'm a creative for sure, but the naming thing is not my jam. But I thought, let's just be literal. Because I will be talking about podcasting. I give solo, episodes. I do tips. And then my goal is to amplify voices. And so I have on business development experts or business experts to give sort of like the tactics, the strategies. But I also have people on who are like coaches, people in the personal development realm, because I really want to support business owners holistically. And I do believe, and evidence from my journey, like your business can only be as big as you see yourself.
Yeah.
So if we're not, working on ourselves, the business stuff is really not going to be effective. So I like to bring on like a mix of both and support the women entrepreneurs that listen that way.
That's awesome. As far as, well, first of all, we have a ton of people watching live. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us. We appreciate you. If you are catching us on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay wherever you are at so we can send you some love in the comments. Kristin, for those watching live, hanging out, they're obviously resonating with all the goodness that you're sharing. Can you tell us what exactly you do in this arena and who should be reaching out to you? Who do you help?
Yeah, so I help female entrepreneurs who are probably, let's say, like 3 to 4 years into their business. They have a good understanding of what their brand is and who they want to impact. And they know they have something to share and they want to share it through their voice. And so I help business owners through a couple different ways. As I mentioned before, I have a course that walks you through really the ABCs of starting a podcast. I do podcast audits for those people who already have podcasts and maybe they started it and they just threw it together and now they're like, oh, wait, what am I doing with this thing? Is it working? Or some people want to relaunch their podcast. They've rebranded, they've pivoted, and they come to me and I help them figure out that process. And then another space that I help entrepreneurs is through my VIP days, which is a one-on-one session. You get coached, you get guided like through every step of the way. And then you get your assets created for you. So it's like a full experience done for you, but with a little co-collaboration because co-collaborating is just like the funnest thing. So I love to sort of like get your ideas, take your vision, and then help you, craft that for you and then work with you to put it out there. So that's really the ways that I support people. And then if you have a podcast, then I also do marketing and management of those. So
beautiful.
Lots of different ways to work with me.
And where can people find you? Where do you hang out on social media if someone wanted to follow you?
Yeah, I'm typically on Instagram. I'm at Podcast and Amplify. So everything's at Podcast and Amplify if you want to find me. So
that's good. You make it easier than many people do. So that's good. And why do you do what you do?
That's such a great question. I really do feel like my passion and my purpose is to help amplify voices that haven't been traditionally heard. I really do feel that way. I have this natural ability, or I guess it's a desire to empower people. It's kind of like baked into everything that I do. Anything I learn, I'm sharing with someone else. I'm always looking for ways to sort of like tell other people, not just in podcasting, but like, yeah, you can do that. Totally. Like, and not blowing smoke, but really genuinely believing in other people's abilities and their superpowers, I like to call them. So that's why I do what I do, because I think it's important and I think I'm good at it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. And I think that, yes, on all levels, yes, we need to be opening up a podcast and or guest speaking in order to impact on our ideas, our thoughts, move communities, move society, and then also on the business aspect, which sometimes those merge. But on the business side, as far as, creating more income, actually.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And two, like, I want to leave people with, like, if you don't think you have like a leading voice, just know that like you do, everyone has something to say. Everyone has a story, and it's just about tapping into it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Kristin. We appreciate you being here. For those that are watching live and resonating with Kristin, all the goodness that she shared today, her website is podcastandamplify.com. It should be in a link in wherever you're watching us at, a clickable link, so you can find her. She predominantly hangs out on Instagram, and we love to connect people here on this platform in order to make sure that we all continue to rise. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
Just thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. And if anyone wants to hop on a free like clarity call, like if you have a little inkling of a podcast idea, then reach out to me.
Awesome. Could they find that on your website?
Yes, it's on my website.
Awesome. To book a call?
Yes.
Beautiful. All right. You heard it here on Her Talk Show. That brings us to the end of yet another incredible episode of Her Talk Show. I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our amazing guest speaker, Kristin, for sharing her wisdom and inspiring us all to jump on some podcasts. To each and every one of you, our dedicated listeners, thank you for staying with us until the very end. Your support and engagement means the world to us. Remember to follow, like, and share this podcast with your fellow trailblazers. Join me again in our next episode for more captivating stories, enlightening thoughts, and empowering ideas to fuel your journey toward becoming the best version of yourself. Together, let's strive to be better, do better, and human better than we did yesterday. Once again, I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I invite you to join our amazing community, Her Nation, where we continue these transformative conversations and uplift each other. Until next time.